So to anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Maclennan. I'm a creative director here at Made Agency. I normally focus on visual creative stuff, but I also have a kind of morbid fascination in, I guess you could call it like technology, but really the intersection of social media and technology. I've always been a bit of a late adopter in terms of I've never opened a Facebook account in my own name. I've never had Facebook. I've never had a Maclennan Facebook profile. I opened a Twitter account very late, and I resisted Instagram to the last minute. And then when Facebook bought Instagram, I almost closed my Instagram account. I'm very wary of technology in a lot of ways. And today I wanted to, instead of talking about something visual, I wanted to share some thoughts on technology and the way that it impacts our lives, and some of the habits we can learn, or some of the ways we can think about it that might build healthier relationships with technology, because it's a really important part of our lives. So first I wanted to do a little test. Who here has an alarm that they set on their cell phone that they wake up to in the morning? Show of hands. That means everybody in this room who put up their hand, the first thing that you touch every day is your device. So the first thing that you physically interact with, perhaps you switch on the light before you turn off your alarm, but the first piece of technology that you interact with is your mobile device. Who here checks their notifications within 15 minutes of waking up in the morning? Roughly the same number of people. I'd say that's like at least 80% of us. Some interesting things to consider, like there are about 2,400 moments that you touch your device every day. For people who have extreme cell phone usage habits, shall we call them, that number is as high as 5,400 times a day. It's also interesting that, so I'm going to look at my notes now and again, because there are some facts that are going to escape me if I don't. So another interesting thing is that cell phone use has been tied to poor sleep patterns. It's been proven to increase anxiety. It's been proven to increase depression. It's even led to higher suicide rates in teens in America, and obviously in other countries too, but that's where the research was done. So it's food for thought, and I'll let you guys draw your own conclusions. But before I carry on with that line of thinking, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this thing called the attention economy. And we're all quite familiar with the phrase because it's in the Made Credentials document. On one of our slides, we say, in the attention economy, we curate our lives. And that has pretty positive connotations in the context of our credentials document. But I think there is a deeper understanding that we need to have around the attention economy and how it kind of formed. So the first guy to ever really define this thing that we call the attention economy is a guy called Herbert A. Simon. He put it this way. He said, with a wealth of information, there's a dearth of something else. Scarcity of whatever it is that information consumes. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. So what Herbert Simon was saying is that because of the amount of media we have, there's a scarcity of attention. And we all know what happens when you create a scarcity of something, whether unintentionally or intentionally, it becomes incredibly valuable. A lot of people might be familiar with the De Beers example, where they starved the market of diamonds for many years. And before they did that, diamonds were basically worthless. And I chose this ad in particular because nowadays, a diamond can put you back more than 2 months' salary. And we associate it with incredible value, and it is essentially a worthless, transparent piece of rock. So you look at this and you're like, well, an attention economy suddenly seems like quite an evil thing. And there's all these mega corporations who are putting these evil systems in place to control the mass population. And it's not true. The attention economy is kind of arbitrary. It happened by itself, and it's really just a way that we describe this kind of phenomena. And it's really brought to light some interesting conversations around our attention and what it's worth. So, for example, there's this idea that you're owed interruption rights by every company that interacts with you. And as technology gets easier to kind of track, and as communications and media get easier to track, it's much easier to tell who's seen adverts and who hasn't seen them. And there's this idea, and I think that the companies of the future are going to have to kind of buy into this, whether they like it or not, that every person who sees an advert, you shouldn't just be paying the media company that puts the advert in front of the person, you should be paying that person for their attention. There's another thing called attention bonds, which is quite an interesting concept, where a company would give you a bond worth a certain financial value, and at any point you could opt out of their communication by cashing in that bond, and you could hold on to it as long as you were willing to continue receiving information from them. So it's quite an interesting thing, but unfortunately, in this day and age and in our current society and the way that the world works, all of these applications and websites and media companies are really incentivized to hijack your attention and really incentivized to grab your attention and manipulate it and get your eyes on their product, get you interacting with their product for longer. And the reason for that is quite simple. They want ad revenue. The longer you spend on their website, the more times you scroll on Instagram, the more ads they can serve you and the more money they make. And essentially it puts the consumer at the bottom of the food chain. So I'm going to pause for a second and talk about hijacks and how we spot a hijack. There's a guy called Tristan Harris. He's a product design ethicist at Google. And he writes a very interesting article about 8 different ways to spot a technology hijack and the different things that technology companies and products and developers and designers specifically actually do to steal your attention and to grab your attention and hold on to it for as long as possible. I'm not going to go through all of his examples. I'm just going to go through 3 of the very common ones, or the ones that I think are the most exciting and fun. And the first of which is probably the most common of all. It's this little red dot over here. Tristan Harris calls it the slot machine in your pocket. And it works on several levels. So not only do you never know when that little red dot is going to pop up, and it gives you that little spike of dopamine. This is quite a widely discussed thing at the moment. A lot of people are familiar with it. You never know when that dot's going to pop up, but the best thing about this little red dot is you never know how many likes or who did what you're going to get when you open that thing. So it's very enticing to click on it. If this little red dot disclosed more information, people would be less likely to click on those notifications. It's called, I'm going to go back to my notes for a second. It's called intermittent variable reward. And it's been proven to work to the benefit of slot machines because basically the randomness and the intermittent nature of the rewards have been proven scientifically to increase addiction in gamblers, and that's why they use this method of kind of interspersing notifications. Another interesting method is this bottomless feed, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. There's lots of examples of this, and it appears in very different ways. So the most common, of course, is Instagram. Like, I'm sure you guys can all relate to scrolling through Instagram long enough that you end up on the content that you last saw when you were on Instagram. If you do that for a week, that means you never miss anything that Instagram is giving you for an entire week. And there's months that go by where I do that. I'm guilty of a lot of these habits. So I'm not saying that I've figured out some way to get around this. I'm just kind of sharing my experiences with you guys. Gizmodo, when you get to the bottom of an article, you see a green line and you scroll one more time and it loads an entire new article and a new set of advertising, and you've just been tricked into clicking on another page without even clicking on anything. Netflix has autoplay, which is extremely efficient in keeping you there for episodes at a time, binge watching entire series without looking up. And recently Reddit did an interesting redesign where they removed pagination from the bottom of their pages. So previously I would get to the bottom of a page and I would maybe go to the next page in the subreddit, and I would know that by the time you get to the bottom of page 2, you're really interacting with low quality content. And now I find that I'm 5 or 6 pages worth of content deep, and I'm consuming information that I never really wanted to consume. And Tristan Harris again points to the scientific experiment where a bunch of evil scientists hooked up soup bowls with a control, obviously, where it's just a soup bowl sitting on the table and you can eat as much as you want, and you tell the scientist when you're full and you guess how much you ate. And then they somehow hooked up a hose to the bottom of the other soup bowls that would refill the soup bowl as you ate soup. And basically gave these people a bottomless soup bowl. And the people who were hooked up to the bottomless soup bowl ate 73% more soup before they said they were full. And they grossly underestimated how many calories they had. So think about that in correlation with technology and how scrolling through a bottomless feed like Tumblr or Instagram or Facebook or any of the websites that do that these days, you're ultimately going to consume more information than you thought. And there's a couple of tips that I'll get to at the end of this, but something that just occurred to me now, which is actually a tip that I read on Reddit about Reddit. You should scroll down to the point that you're happy with, and then you should read upwards to the top of the page, and you should close the tab when you're done. So you decide how much soup you want to eat. The next thing, which is probably the evilest of all of these hijacks, is playing on people's emotional anxiety, on their kind of insecurities. This is a very persuasive little pop-up. I don't think anyone in this room could resist clicking on that blue button to find out what photo Mark posted of you. Another thing that Facebook does, which is quite interesting, is they actually take your profile picture when you change it, and they keep it at the top of people's news feeds for longer, because they know that when people interact with your profile picture, the more people who like and react to your profile picture, you're going to go straight back there because you're vulnerable. Your basic human insecurities make you vulnerable when you do a profile picture update. So they'll keep that around for longer, and they'll prioritize that over other information because they know it gets them more likes and it gets them more time on screen. And of course, if this button here didn't say see photo and it said spend the next 20 minutes on Facebook scrolling aimlessly, you might consider twice clicking on that little button and heading over to Facebook. So the future looks bleak. Everybody is trying to steal your attention. Everybody's trying to hijack your time. Luckily, there are people who are thinking about what can be done. How do we create human-oriented systems? How can we create design that puts people first and really looks after the needs of consumers? There's this guy, his name is Joe Edelman, and he has done some fantastic research on how to better design certain products. He's got a video series, and I'll do a Medium blog post on all of this and give you guys all the links and references and apps you can download and all kinds of cool stuff like that. This is an adapted version of his design because I wanted to pull out a couple of kind of specific examples which I don't feel like he covered in his videos. But this looks like a pretty innocuous lock screen on an Android device. This is pretty much exactly what my lock screen looks like. Every time I wake up in the morning, and you look at it and at face value, it's like, oh, well, that's a perfectly normal lock screen. It's just got some notifications and a clock and your Wi-Fi network, you're connected. But when you start digging into what each of these notifications is doing and what each of these things uses to manipulate you into clicking on it, you start realizing that there's a lot of stuff that you're being exposed to here that perhaps you might not want on your phone when you wake up first thing in the morning. So the first thing which has really been bugging me recently is that Google keeps trying to tell me to tap to retrain my OK Google voice model, which is the same as Siri for people who don't use Android devices. Basically, you say OK Google and it brings up a thing and it does whatever you tell it, and that's great, except I'm getting these notifications at 20 to 10 at night when I don't have time or energy to do this. I'm getting them in the middle of the workday and there's no option to reschedule it. So it's just crappy user experience and it really bugs me out. I keep swiping it away and it keeps coming back at the wrong time. Once again, ego and insecurity, Adam tagged me in a photo and I have to go and find out what it was. I have to go and click on it. We've discussed that one already. This thing of live stories, Secret Adventurer started a live story. That's like playing on that sense of urgency and the fear of missing out. Yes, you Hank. And that it really plays on that basic human, like, I don't want to miss a thing. I'm afraid of missing something. And then there's this, like, it's just unnecessary. Like, this is an actual message I got in a group. I've changed the person's name to protect their identity, but lots of smoke in town last night. Anyone know if there was a fire somewhere? To 15 of my friends. Like, what difference does it make? Like, anyway, so like, consider what notifications you allow through on your phone as well, and I'll talk about that in a moment too. This is also just like poor recommendation algorithms. I searched for fried chicken once on Pinterest, and I am still being followed around the internet by fried chicken recipes. Like, if they were smart, they'd recommend a coleslaw recipe or something that goes well with fried chicken. Chances are I've either been to your website and found a fried chicken recipe that works and gone off and made it, or I didn't find it on your website and I never want to go back there again because Pinterest is maybe a shitty place to look for recipes. And then I put this one in here. I don't actually have Tinder. But amongst all of this stuff, there are sometimes these human messages that come through, and there are sometimes things that really matter to you. And Tinder may seem fickle, but human interaction is important, and that's one of the beautiful things about technology, is it connects us with other humans in a number of ways. And these things get buried amongst other things that actually don't deserve our attention. So what if we started from a blank screen and we thought about what people are actually trying to achieve when they pick up their phone in the morning? So some of this is Edelman's design, and then some of these things I've kind of tweaked again just to kind of better suit my purpose, and I think represent a more honest version of what technology could actually look like. The first thing that he suggested doing was having a countdown timer instead of a clock counting up. Instead of telling you how much time you've missed, how about telling you how much productive time you have left, and allowing you to interface with the technology to tell you how much productive time, or you tell the machine how much productive time you'd like to spend in the morning. Maybe your most productive time is in the evening. It disables all unnecessary notifications for that period of time, and it really lets you focus, and it encourages you to do the things that matter to you. Then you tell the machine what matters to you. So what would you like to do this morning? And you can pre-program a bunch of stuff into this monthly, weekly, daily, hourly. I'd like to drink water. I'd like to practice mindfulness. I'd like to work on writing my blog post. I'd like to learn something, perhaps off a different platform. I could go to Medium and it could select the best article and take me to Medium and give me something really interesting. Or it could even be like genuinely emotional, like technology encouraging emotional connections, which is something that people often overlook. Like, it has this human value. And then it would tell you how long each of those things would take. And it wouldn't suggest stuff that you can't get done in those 2 hours and 15 minutes. And you could cross the little things off, and allows you to prioritize and plan your morning. And then, like I said, there are these important human notifications. So how about it would just tell you if you had that one important notification instead of the 10 that don't matter. And then once you're done with all of that, it could know that chronologically, the next thing you're going to want to do is get to work on time. And it could suggest a route with Google Now, or live traffic report or something like that. And then suddenly you have this piece of human-centered design. So this is great and all, but the reality is that most of the apps and the programs and the software and stuff that we use today actually are miles away from this kind of thinking. And money drives people to make poor decisions when it comes to the user a lot of the time. And so the question goes from what can be done to what can be done right now. So what little changes can we make in our lives to better protect ourselves against being hijacked, to create healthier relationships with technology? And these are very kind of short and sweet little tips. There's 10 of them. And this is not some like life-changing advice. And I would suggest you all try them, but some of them won't work for you. And if you adopt just one of these habits, then I guarantee you will start having a better relationship with the devices that you use every day. So the first rule, and I love this one, is human notifications only. Only allow notifications from your apps that come from real human beings. This means if someone likes a photo of yours on Instagram and Instagram sends you a notification, that's not a human interaction. That's not a human being sending you a message. The other thing is maybe I'm jumping ahead here. Okay, I'll pause that thought for a second. This was a really good thing for me. I have this nervous tick reaction with Instagram. I'll get into the elevator and I'll whip out my phone and I'll open Instagram because there's other people in the lift and I don't want to be standing there staring at them or looking in the mirror and then I catch their eye. You have these go-to apps that you open in these nervous situations. And if that go-to app is offering you a better, more wholesome feed, then it benefits you better. So what I did was I created an Instagram account for my studio, and I would encourage you to create one which isn't even affiliated to you as a person, just so you can follow stuff that inspires you, that keeps you learning new things. So my studio Instagram account is literally just design stuff. And every time I open it, I walk away and I'm more inspired and I feel driven creatively and I want to do stuff and I want to try new things that I've found in that feed. And the other thing is browsing better on Google Chrome. These are a little bit mixed up, but I'll jump around a little bit. Browsing better on Google Chrome for me means being aware of which tabs you have open which steal your attention. A lot of people will have a WhatsApp window open and a Facebook window open, and I used to use Slack in my browser and you'll have all of these and then some research tabs and maybe Shutterstock's open and you're downloading a thing over there and you're trying to write in a Google Doc. You're trying to focus on a Google Doc and you've got 15 tabs open on every side of it and you're just being pulled in 1,000 different directions and you're wondering why you're not getting anything done. Another good thing you can do with Google Chrome is you can replace your new tab with a blank tab or with a productivity app like Wunderlist. And that I find limits the distraction that those frequently visited websites offer you. So this goes back to 2 slides ago. Those unhealthy user experiences, those things that steal your attention, the apps that we love to scroll for hours on. Sometimes you're like, life sucks. I'm just going to scroll through cat videos on Tumblr for like the next 4 hours. And that's fine. We need to allow ourselves those moments of kind of just letting go. But it's good to know when we're doing that. And something that I think helps is putting all of your unhealthy user experiences in a folder on your phone. So taking all of those apps and bundling them together, the ones that you know aren't good for you and the ones that you know take up hours of your day, and leaving in there. So every time you open that folder, you know you're in for a little bit of a personal, emotional struggle. Find better apps. This goes back to the Instagram thing. Like, imagine if every time you opened Instagram out of pure kind of whatever, you were actually learning something valuable, or you were catching up on current affairs, or you were reading an interesting Medium blog article, or you were learning a new language. So consider what apps you open frequently and try and find ways to replace them with apps that are better for you, basically. Leave the group, leave the WhatsApp group, that one that actually isn't helping. It's not achieving anything. When people are organizing a birthday and they could have just used a broadcast, but they create a bloody group instead. Just leave the group. Get the information, leave the group. Leave it behind. No one's going to miss you. No one's going to like pine over your disappearance on the group. And then there's just a couple of apps which are rather useful, which I think everybody needs to install. Every single one of you needs to install these apps, and I'll link you to them in the blog post. AdBlock Plus. Block the ads. It's fine if we do it.
You target people with AdBlock.
Yeah. So block the fucking ads. Get rid of them. You'd be amazed at what a different experience it is browsing the web without adverts. I sometimes, just for laughs, open up the AdBlock Plus extension window and look at how many adverts it's blocked on a page. And those pages that you think are fairly chilled and fairly innocuous, you'll open up and it'll say like 16 adverts blocked on this page. And you didn't even realize you were looking at adverts. And it just cuts all of that crap out. YouTube pre-rolls, Facebook ads, everything just disappears. It's a fantastic experience. Flux is really good for having better sleep patterns at night. Those of us who read on our devices late at night, it basically cuts out all of the blue light and it replaces it with warm light. What that does is it makes it easier to fall asleep and it creates a better quality of sleep once you are asleep. So you can install Flux on your MacBook Pro, or some devices like my phone actually has a blue light filter in the settings that you can just turn on and then the screen goes orange, which is really nice. And that just helps you achieve a better kind of sleep pattern. Install Focusrite. This is for the copywriters who aren't here today. But for everyone else as well, for anyone who writes on your machine, I find writing in a Google Doc is a nightmare. Writing in word processing programs is a nightmare. Focusrite is just a blank page with one font, one text style. You can make things bold, italic, or underlined, and that's it. No distractions, just a clean background, and it blocks out all other app notifications, and you can just get shit done. And then the last thing that I wanted to recommend everyone gives a try, but this really isn't for everyone, is Calm is a brilliant app if you guys are interested in mindfulness and having a moment of silence in the morning. You can do a 3-minute meditation and just kind of clear your head, and you become more productive and you become more focused. And this kind of mindfulness practice, even through an application, has been proven conclusively to reduce stress and kind of make you a better functioning human being in many ways. And that's it. Those are my 10 things you can do.